No movie epitomizes Hollywood's Cold War, Red Scare, Russian villain obsession more than Red Dawn, a film where the Soviet Union invades the USA to kill school teachers and terrorize a small town, only for a group of guerrilla high school kids led by Charlie Sheen's cooler older brother Patrick Swayze to fight back against the big bad Russians and reclaim their American freedoms. It's a simple, somewhat controversial at the time, surprisingly self-serious movie appealing to that 80s gun-toting American power fantasy of fighting back against the spooky perils of communism or invaders or something. 40 odd years later, being an Australian in my 20s, it's all a bit silly and distant to me, but Red Dawn never revels in that silliness. There's no nods, winks, or wisecracks. It's relentlessly gritty to a fault, to the point where it's surreal. Freedom Fighters is a third-person shooter by IO Interactive that was released in 2003, around the tail end of the bulk of the evil Russian Hollywood blockbuster movies, and it takes a lot of inspiration from Red Dawn. From the introduction to the character designs to the Russians' infinitely resourced presence to the final mission, Red Dawn can be felt throughout, only Freedom Fighters does have a lot more fun with it, telling the majority of its tale through a corny propaganda news program. The Russians have invaded, and it's up to blue-collar plumber Christopher Stone to lead the resistance and take back New York. Beneath the corny Russian invasion veneer is a very smartly constructed game, reimagining the archetypal tactical squad shooters of the time like Ghost Recon, Rainbow Six, or Hidden and Dangerous into something far more fast-paced, action-focused, and most importantly, approachable. As the developers put it in pre-release interviews, it's a squad shooter aimed at the console market. Gone is the need to worry about formations or loadouts or in-depth planning screens or gadgets or slowly edging around corners. This isn't a simulator. It plays more like an arcadey third-person shooter with over-the-shoulder aiming, which turned out to be pretty ahead of its time considering every third-person shooter now has over-the-shoulder aiming, but it adopts these basic design elements from those tactical shooters with commands for your squad, as well as the multiple objective open level design. The focus here is on executing a few things really well. Like, take the AI for example. Those of you who played those tactical games probably have memories of teammates getting stuck in corners or doors or struggling to walk past a small rock on the ground or something, but in Freedom Fighters, the AI keeps up with you no matter what. They'll effortlessly climb over complex geometry and find ways through multi-storied tight indoor spaces, and while I'm sure they do cheat a bit, the illusion that they don't is virtually always maintained, which is impressive now, let alone for 2003. And unless you're sending them in front of a turret, helicopter, or an army, you can be confident they'll clear a room for you or scout ahead without dying. IO have struck this perfect balance where you need your teammates as much as they need you. Unless you're playing on the easiest difficulty, you can't just sit back, and you will have to get involved with the action yourself and revive teammates using health packs when necessary, which is often enough that you need to keep it in mind, but not so often that it's annoying. You build a sense of camaraderie with these polygonal fighters because you rely on one another. Perfectly Balanced describes the core of how Freedom Fighters plays. It's as if it was meticulously play-tested and tweaked to hit a wonderful sweet spot between feeling powerful and powerless. Whether it's the amount of resources you have, or how much health you have, or how much health your teammates have, or where resources are placed around the map, it all feels very precise. You need to worry about your ammo and health packs and approach firefights somewhat thoughtfully, but not so thoughtfully that you can't run in with your men and play the action hero at times. Deciding whether or not you need to use a health pack on yourself more than your dying teammate is engaging, and the levels are laid out so that you can feel clever by finding alternate routes or secret areas with extra supplies, but it's never so complex that you get lost. It's all so well balanced. Even the save points laid around the map as manholes feel perfectly placed to keep things stressful, but not too stressful. One of the biggest criticisms Freedom Fighters receives is that for most weapons, the bullet spread is extreme, and it is. Like, bullets fly radially in random directions, and it can feel pretty ridiculous when you're trying to land a headshot with your crosshair aimed perfectly, but the bullets just aren't going where you want them to go. This is obviously going to be an immediate turnoff for some, but if you can cope with it, it isn't unintentional. Narratively, you're just an everyday plumber who would suck at handling a firearm, so it kind of works in that context, but looking at it from a gameplay perspective, it both keeps you close to the action, and it keeps you from being too useful. If you could beeline your way through freedom fighters scoring headshots, it wouldn't work nearly as well. You wouldn't need to rely on your teammates, and in turn you wouldn't get to see all the cool AI battles play out. It has that same unscripted, amusing quality of watching the AI fight each other in something like Halo, with everyone yelling and taking cover and trying to flank and taking control of nearby turrets. Freedom Fighters would be a far less interesting game if you didn't see any of that, because you could just creep around every corner scoring headshots from hundreds of meters away. The inaccuracy here forces you to get involved and forces you to be a team player simply by limiting how powerful you are. In fact, you can look at the game Fear to see how this could be a problem in a similar way, because Fear also does some impressive stuff with its enemy AI, but because you can just slow down time and score a headshot as soon as you see an enemy, you almost have to play poorly on purpose just to see the AI do their thing. Freedom Fighters doesn't have this problem. The inaccurate aiming is a bold design choice and one that does technically lower the skill ceiling, but the more you understand what this game is, the more you realize why it's a thing. And still, even if you can't aim as good, you're usually mowing down more bad guys than all your squad mates combined, which is made extra fun by some silly early 2000s ragdoll effects. The opening levels are where the inaccurate aiming is at its most annoying, because you start the game completely alone without any squad mates following you. It's you against the world for a bit, and it's difficult. You're outnumbered and you're constantly running out of ammo and health packs just to get through it, but when you do, you gain the respect of the underground resistance and recruit a couple of followers, which is like a breath of fresh air, aided by the attack, follow, and defend commands being effortlessly intuitive. You then enter this rhythm of taking back key parts of New York and completing side objectives like blowing up helipads, blowing up bridges, and freeing prisoners that literally have POW written on their backs. How apt. The genius of it all, the core of where I think Freedom Fighters really elevates from a good game to a great one, is every objective you complete, whether it's as small as reviving a random civilian with a health pack, or as large as taking back a power plant, earns you charisma points, filling up that yellow bar in the corner, and every time you fill that bar to completion, a slot opens up for you to recruit another teammate. This simple progression system adds so much to Freedom Fighters. Like, it makes running into extra resistance members on the map rewarding, as you can recruit any that you see as long as you have a slot for them. It makes you want to do every objective that you possibly can so that you can add more members to your squad. It's addictive watching your team grow over the course of the game. You feel like you earn the protagonist's transformation from a lone plumber with only a wrench to fight with to the leader of the resistance commanding a small army around. And you do command a small army around. The final mission has a whopping 12 people follow you to do your bidding, and it is so satisfying sending them all uphill into battle. There's shades of Mountain Blade to it. As the resistance are slowly but surely overrunning the Soviets, you're quite literally overrunning them at ground level with your men, serving as a really effective thematic parallel with the plot. The gameplay naturally evolves from the lonely, desperate struggle at the start to the pure empowerment at the end. You slowly go from lacking control on the battlefield to having full control over it, and it feels earned. Things like the protagonist's outfit changing and hair getting longer, or your underground base that you visit between missions getting more populated with resistance members and the tents that they're living out of, all contributes to this great sense of progression using attention to detail, and it's all scored by Jesper Kyd with these amazing Soviet-influenced choral arrangements combined with his ambient Hitman-esque synth and digital chops. It's unique, it's emotional, it kicks in at all the right times, and it won multiple awards for being the best video game soundtrack that year for a reason. There's no major aspect to Freedom Fighters that you can single out as a weak link. It's all very considered, and it all clicks together wonderfully. The narrative is probably the weakest if you did have to pick one, but even it stands above your typical video game story, being told in an efficient, earnest, fun way with good voice acting, and being held up by the game's gameplay, aesthetic, and atmosphere, supporting its themes of camaraderie, oppression, and overcoming adversity. There's no allegories to be found in this pulpy tale, like We couldn't be further from Shakespeare, but instead of feeling detached and distantly amused by this story like I felt with Red Dawn, Freedom Fighters kept me involved with its illusion of teamwork. It kept me engaged by its smartly put together combat systems, and it kept me eager and excited for its entire 8-hour campaign to build up a team and drive out those big bad Russians. It's a very focused, very clever shooter masquerading as a schlocky B-movie. Playing this 2003 game today, though it has aged well all things considered, it's obviously gonna be dated. Visually, I personally like the more cartoonish character design, the cleanliness without any post-processing, and the use of color. The latter half in the snow looks particularly good, but others might just see an old video game, and control-wise, this suffers from mouse movements being jittery no matter what DPI your mouse is, and whenever you aim while you're right next to a wall, the game just awkwardly yanks control away from you. You need to sort of train yourself not to aim while standing right next to obstacles. You can mitigate this by playing on console, and while it is a solid game on console, you either have to rely on the very loose auto-aim or the very awkward precise aim, neither of which are as palatable as just playing on PC. Also, no matter which version of this you're playing, you're forced to automatically reload whenever you stop shooting for a second, which is just as annoying as it sounds, even if the reload animations are short. These are all hoops that you unfortunately will have to jump through, and just a tip, if you're playing this for the first time, I recommend playing on the second hardest difficulty. Also on the console ports is an up to 4-player split-screen King of the Hill multiplayer mode where you get to command a whole bunch of troops to attack your friends, which is pretty amusing at first, but the whole thing sort of feels like an afterthought. I'm only really mentioning it for completion's sake, and its absence is not missed at all on the PC version. Nowadays, a potential sequel gets thrown around whenever the original Freedom Fighters is mentioned, a sequel that was once set to release in 2005, but that never happened, and there's barely been a peep about it from IO Interactive since, though they did reacquire the rights to the game and put it up on digital platforms in 2020. Having now played through Freedom Fighters a few times over the years and having appreciated it a little more each time, it's no wonder there's such fanfare for a sequel. I'd also love to see a sequel, not only because it's such a well-crafted video game, but because there's nothing else quite like it. And there we wrap up the video. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, like, subscribe, comment, bell, YouTube algorithm. It actually helps when I ask you to do that, even if I do it in a completely sarcastic tone. So if you want to help out, that's a way you can help out, or you can help out on Patreon. And thank you to all my patrons. They're all sort of scrolling on the screen right now. This is the first time I'm not reading out names, which I'm no longer doing, but from $1, you can get your name on this screen right now if you go check out my Patreon. Yeah, hope you enjoyed this one. I kind of just wanted to talk about a game I love, basically. I started the new year being like, I just want to kick back, play a video game that's a classic, means a lot to me. I don't want to come into this review with any sort of great angle. It's not a licensed game or anything. It's just a video game that I played growing up, and I played again, and it's still awesome. Yeah, I don't know. It's fun reviewing stuff that I really, really like, you know? It's easier to do this. But yeah, hope you've all been well. Happy New Year. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.